Good morning. It's Monday. Driving to work. Gonna rant for a minute. So yeah, hope everybody had a good Sunday. Spent some time with family. Spent some time with God, and had some food. I think that's a good use of a Sunday. Um, you all may or may not be aware, depending on your social media feeds and things like that. Mine is attuned to some very odd oddities. Um, Chaos has broken loose in Mexico. I heard a new term I hadn't followed yet, which I mean, I'm not constantly trying to be in the know, but I try to be somewhat knowledgeable of what's going on in a lot of places. And Mexico, shout out to all my friends in Mexico. Though I apologize, I don't try to keep in contact enough. And this is in English, so you're probably not watching, but maybe you are. The leader of the New Generation cartel was killed yesterday in a firefight, and chaos is breaking loose across all of Jalisco. I'll probably pronounce things very gringo adjacent while speaking English. Not trying to put too much pepper, habanero into the way I'm talking. Anyway, it was fascinating. There's a few social media accounts that I follow from Mexico for news purposes. One is Ed Calderon. Another one's El Gafe, and Demoler is another one. And it's really interesting because they give you more of a on the ground, kind of plugged in to some of the back channel type view of many things, not everything, but many things happening in that world in Mexico. And they were talking about this early. The first videos I saw were, I think, of just people from Jalisco, and then a video from Ed popped up, and the context, what prompted me thinking about it more this morning was uh, a very well, there's a couple things here, but a young woman in Jalisco popped up, flawless English, perfect English, which we'll get to, and basically was accusing the CIA of creating and collapsing the New Generation cartel. Now, my thoughts, fact, fiction, strategy. Listen, back in the 1970s, 1980s, and into the 90s even, the CIA was, the three-letter agencies from the United States were doing all sorts of nonsense down in in Mexico and South America, and in what we would consider also Central America. There was a lot of nonsense going on. Um, when I was in Mexico serving my mission, you encountered people that were typically cartel adjacent, but most of the cartels operating at that time, so this was a long time ago, um, most of the cartels operating at that time, especially in the areas I were more like just logistics, right? There was beef over like paths and ports, but for the most part, like, you weren't getting widespread violence. That wasn't a tool that was typically used by those cartels, and that's been well documented by other people far more knowledgeable on the topic. Um, Gotta stop saying it's a bad habit. Then some new cartel styles came in. I believe one of the cartels, I think it's a predecessor to the new generation, um, was started by like a bunch of, as I understand it, a bunch of Mexican special forces that kind of said, "Oh, why are we protecting these guys when we could just do it ourselves?" And I, I, I feel bad for and I pray for the people of Mexico. The people of Mexico are good people, and there's a lot to love. Um, Family orientation, like a real eye towards God, and a not that that's the only thing that makes you a good person, um, but I think we should celebrate things that I think draw people in a positive direction. Um, but yeah, like there's really good people down there, and I feel terrible that this is the situation that they have, and it's not. This isn't a one and done thing. This isn't like a new problem. The cartel violence has been escalating. When I was in college and we were studying, um, it was in my insurgency counterinsurgency class. We were kind of looking into it, and more people had died in Mexico through the drug war than had died in Iraq to that point. Just for like frame of reference. Nice pop. Welch's cranberry, cran grape. So it was bad. Fascinating. Um, the professor that was teaching our insurgency counterinsurgency class, we were allowed to study all sorts of things as that were insurgencies and counterinsurgencies, and what were the successful strategies for fighting an insurgency. And there was two topics that we weren't really allowed to touch. So, as I remember, she would not let anybody write about the American Revolutionary War as an insurgency, reframing that as a successful insurgency. She was like, nah, you're not doing that. And the other one that I was trying to do, I wasn't trying to do the first one for reference, but I was like, oh, why don't I analyze the drug war and the cartels as an insurgency? And I was told absolutely not, under no certain uncertain terms was I to write that paper. And I went, well, now I think that's interesting, but it was fascinating that we weren't allowed to look at the drug war as an insurgency. Because even all the way back then, so this is like 2011, 2012, 2013, 2011, 2012, just a quick glance, the drug war was being fought completely wrong. And it shouldn't have been a drug war. It should have been handled as an insurgency. Had Mex and I think Mexico has started to treat it more like an insurgency over the last 10 years, from what I've kind of peripherally paid attention to, which has had more effectiveness. And the strategies for fighting an insurgency are not the same as the strategies for fighting like a traditional near peer adversary war, or like fighting a terrorist organization. They play out differently, and it has to do with lots of strategies and positioning and resources, and there's actually quite deep understanding of how to handle an insurgent group, and we have interesting examples of how to do it right. We just tend to not have people wanting to do it right for a lot of reasons. but I digress. So what's going on in Puerto Vallarta? Sorry, Puerto Vallarta, and in Jalisco is really terrible. Um, I'll try to do from my thoughts, like second, third order effects. I'm not super plugged in, um, but I would guess one of a couple of things is going to happen. There's been these decapitation operations recently for some of the major cartels, and I don't. It's been very destabilizing for the cartels themselves, and I don't know what the end effect of that might be. The cartels were wildly they're like I don't think people understand how much like money and resource, at least for example, the lore that I was told, um, so back in like 2005, 2006, was that one of the major cartel heads had been arrested at one point. And I'm trying to remember who it was. It might have been the head of Sinaloa. Anyway, when he got arrested, he essentially offered to let him out of jail to pay off Mexico's national external debt. Like, just for frame of reference. Like, now, is that a true story? Not 100% sure. But I think the context of how much money and resources these organizations actually have uh, bears teasing out, right? The idea in that story is like they're no longer like businesses. They're no longer concerned with like like not even like billionaire problems. They're concerned with like nation state level resources. So like, oh yeah, I'll pay off your your debt to other countries. I will pay off if you let me out of jail. That's a wild story. And being down there, like that was everybody's like, yeah, good cops don't last. They don't typically last. You're gonna get paid off. You're gonna get killed off, plumo or plata, or you're gonna quit. If you're a good cop, you're just not gonna make it. And like many of the problems that I saw, like people would always say, like, oh, like a judge, you can do this, and so that. Like it was a lot more in the open in many of the government corruption and the cartel corruption, and like how and where things got done, and a lot of people would be frustrated because like it doesn't matter what party changes, like the stealing still happens. So it was really a frustrating situation for them in Mexico, from what I remember. And looking at the things that like the information and data, I don't think it's changed a ton in many aspects. I think in others it has. So there's been some massive lifting of people's lives, and I would say there's been actually quite a lot of changes. Maybe not as noticeable. It's kind of like boiling a frog. It's been incremental, but there have been changes. And addressing the lady's statement I heard this morning about how it's all the CIA, maybe I wouldn't. I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that at least the New Generation Cartel was initially supported or helped as they dismantled a lot of the other cartels. There's some like Operation Fast and the Furious under the Obama administration, where we were sending guns that weren't going to work to the cartel to trace them, I'm like, hang, like they're not smart enough to swap a firing pin or something and make it functional. These are incredibly resourceful people that are going to test these things and like manufacture or acquire the parts they need. But it's fascinating that all of a sudden weapons from the U.S. started flowing into the hands of specific cartels. Now, like lots of people are like, oh yeah, like the black market in sections of Mexico has always been robust, and you've always been able to buy whatever you want. And the difference being like the famous place in Mexico City is it was a little more open air. Like you could just walk in. Well, you you can't just walk in, but you could get there and you could get anything you wanted. Anything you wanted. Like that was the stories that people would tell me from there. It was like, yeah, whatever you want. People, organs, guns, you name it. You can get it there. You can get it, or they'll get it for you. Now you got to be careful because you might get robbed on the way out, depending on who you are and what you're buying. But yeah, you could get anything you wanted all the way back then. I imagine that it's not. If you knew the places in the United States, you could probably find a lot of that still, but it wouldn't be like a big open air market of anything you want. You just have to be rich, obscenely rich, and you can just do and get whatever you want. Apparently, there's no consequences. But so the lady making the accusation that it could have been a CIR, it very well could have been that the New Generation Cartel was initially supported, possibly even funded, protected by a three-letter agency or more as they started gaining power and knocking off some of the other cartels. Uh, you, you, if you've got a problem, like in a fish pond, you put in a fish to help you clean up the problem. You don't get in there always and do it yourself. And then you take care of that fish if you can. So I'd be interested to. I'll be interested to see how this plays out. Um, how smart and connected and powerful was Mencho. I mean, obviously he was very well connected. He was very powerful. And he was knocking off other cartels. But now that the two largest cartels and the cartel that was coming up and taking the most power have been decapitated, I don't know that any one person's good at like has the capacity to take over those operations, or if there's enough mid-level guys that they all kind of devolve into like regional factions again. That'll be the real question, and that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. Uh, if the U.S. military was involved in special operations and in this, I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm starting to wonder how much our current president's paying attention, because this could get out of hand, right? Like this is not a. This might help Scheinbaum consolidate power. Maybe the state has now enough resources, and while there's disarray, can consolidate power in itself, and seize the assets of a lot of these organizations. That's an entirely plausible outcome as well. But I would never ever want like U.S. troop deployments across the border into Mexico. I mean, I would love like we should help as we can. I think having officers and detachments and things go down and help at the request. of the Mexican government is one thing, but I don't know about deploying troops. Also, I go back. Uh, I haven't seen anything yet this morning. The It sounded like the United States was going to strike Iran, and I am once again not a fan of that. Anybody, any politician that supports that, quietly, overtly, out. We don't need another war in the Middle East, and that's like there's regional problems. Like if we're gonna devolve back into you know fiefdoms and you know realpolitik, like we're going back to realism and like regional powers and like the global orders to falling apart. Which honestly, with the way the rich and powerful operate, it may not be the worst thing in the world. I think Brexit proved to be an interesting dynamic. Overall, it did currently hurt the people of Great Britain, but it didn't collapse the way a bunch of the elites said it would. But it sure did make it more difficult for them to do some of their shenanigans. At least on face value, it did. So, but we don't need another quagmire. We don't need another. It, yeah, sure you can break it, but what does that do? The amount of chaos and death that occurs from collapsing a government, even a corrupt government. Now you let warlords and things take over. Like no, like that's not a good idea. It never has been, and it's not beneficial to us. And it'll create more problems. Like that's one that'll come back and bite you. And so I'm absolutely opposed. Like keep shipping lanes open, sure. Strategically put our assets where it's most beneficial to us. Great. Make sure the Straits of Hormuz stay open so everybody can trade through there freely. Fine, but blowing up another country in that region, like, no, this is a bad idea. And I listen. Donald Trump said he was going to end wars and get out of them, and I don't listen. If you want to put the proof in the pudding, nah. Like running it, like the whole Venezuela thing, like they were willing to negotiate. Like Cuba, what are we doing? A 50-year embargo for what? Like it should have ended 20 years ago at a minimum. Like the Cuban people don't need to suffer because we don't like their government. We we also like they'd probably be a lot more socialist like Canada if we opened up and removed our embargo. But I didn't have a class on that ever, did I? Opening a business in Cuba. So yeah, let's not let's not get into any more wars and deploying, you know, rapid deployments of troops for peacekeeping operations. I think Congress still has to vote on it. I think Congress needs to vote on more stuff. I'm happy at least this last time around they funded the government on a more individual basis. So like individual departments were funded separately. But like the war powers resolution that's been introduced, that needs to be voted on ASAP. I want everyone on the record. There's no if, ands, out. President, no. You vote yes or no so we can get you out. And Blake Moore, yeah, I reached out to some people in your office and I've been so impressed the times I've been blocked on social media by you and your accounts because I've asked about your stock trading. So outside of stock tips, I mean, maybe you should be sharing those with all your constituents in real time. Like, why wait? The second you make a trade, why don't we just all get notified here in Utah so we can all do the exact same thing you're doing? mean, at least then you'd be benefiting us here in the state of Utah, not just yourself. And I want my representative to do the right thing. The proximity to power nonsense. Listen, do the right vote or get out. And if we go to war, your ass better resign the next day. If we hit Iran, you should be out. Maybe a small minority of people are like, yeah, let's go start another fight in the Middle East so we can spend another 20 years and $20 billion. Talk about the deficit, and then you're going to send us to war again and not constrain the president and say, no, we're not doing this. Yeah, I love when people say one thing and then do the other. Oh yeah, we need to balance the budget by invading somebody else. No, that's not how that works. War is expensive, and we the people end up paying it. You want to balance the budget? Let's. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of, but like the whole Palmer Lucky or whatever his name is. Yeah, let's be the world's gun store. Let's have great special operations. Let's have phenomenal logistics, and let's sell guns. People need to protect themselves. That'll balance the budget. But us deploying our aircraft carriers everywhere all the time, that seems like us spending a lot of money in ways that it doesn't need to be spent. Keeping shipping lanes over, yeah, I can see the direct economic impact. We should protect our allies, We should keep our aircraft carriers near our allies in the Philippines and Australia and Japan. But to bomb Iran, no. Let Israel figure it out. Anyway, I'm ranting. I'm frustrated. So yeah, and also now that this stuff in Mexico is popping off, this is one that I don't know how it goes completely. The cartels. There are several factions of the cartel, right? It's not a singular unit. Do they reform a coalition? Do they fight each other? What happens? That's an interesting question. I don't know that people know how far and embedded they are, like that organization or those organizations are, even into the United States. Their product makes it to everywhere in the United States. Like they're doing something that FedEx probably can't do. Just for frame of reference, they're moving things illicitly through clandestine and clandestine means the entire time, and you can buy their product anywhere in the world within a few hours. There's enough constant supply for that to happen. So just for frame of reference, and all that money's going someplace. So I mean, hey, if the Mexican government get a hold of that, balance out their budget and help their people out, great. Seize all of that cartel money, and help out your infrastructure. I mean, that's not typically what happens when they get that kind of cash, but I can be hopeful, and hopefully we can hold people accountable. Accountability is what I keep coming back to. It was something I talked about at church yesterday. Accountability. You will be held accountable for your act. Don't worry so much about everybody else's. You be held accountable for yours. So you need to make sure you're doing the right thing. You need to make sure that you're trying to be a good father, a good mother, that you're advocating and doing the things that you're supposed to. Because at the end of the day, you will be held accountable. At some point, that rooster comes home to roost. there's my rant this morning. So, yeah. Uh, Mexican cartel operations to be determined. We better not bomb Iran. I think all of our senators and congressmen should get unelected. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I completely sign off, this whole gerrymandering thing in Utah that people are like trying to repeat, like we drew up a map that was population based, that was like an independent commission that went through and like determined, hey, here's how we'll block this out so people get represented more evenly on population. And yeah, it might give a, you know, a blue or a more liberal voice to a section of Utah. And people are trying to erase that. Like, what kind of garbage people are you to try to steal somebody's voice so they can't be heard? Especially in a wackadoo winner take all system, which doesn't. I got, I got 40% of the vote, but there's three parties, so I get all. No, I get the whole cart. No, but like trying to steal and silence voices, that's how we got to where we are. And if you can't see how it's problematic to steal somebody's voice and silence them, and they get frustrated about it, and that leads to more political chaos. I got beachfront property in Idaho to sell you. Like, don't be a bad person. Everybody should be heard. You might not like what they have to say, but that's the whole point of freedom of speech. That you get to say it. You are free to say it. You should say it. Put your opinions out. Put them up. Like, say them with your chest. You might have horrible opinions. At least I know where you stand. Sometimes I have to start saying out my ideas and then realize that they're bad ideas. And I don't realize that until I start, you know, sharing my ideas. I'm like, oh, mid sentence, I'm like, that is not going to work. That is a bad idea. So yeah, don't try to steal. Don't cook it so you can try to unfairly get an advantage. Maybe have policies that people like, and then you won't have to worry about it because people will like their policies that you have implemented, and then even people from the other side will vote for you because that's how it should be. Also, we should probably get rid of the winner take all system. Maybe some of the states should shift to a parliamentary system so they can, you know, your your governor is elected from. We'll go back, and your governor is elected from like the leading party, and then you can collapse your state government if it's doing something bad that you want. There has to be a revote more often. This guy is passing me. Oh, lady. Oh, and she's gonna realize that that's a police officer in three, two. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Yes, you're all idiots. Anyway, have a good Monday. Stay safe.